1. I'm standing on a ladder in a room I, for some reason, know is a basement. There is the sound of two children arguing and a TV playing nearby. I pay them no mind, but keep on hanging things up. I turn and sit, falling into the corner of the room, bouncing my head against the studs of the unfinished walls. My head is bleeding, and I curse while I'm continually asked by a small girl, "Uncle Garnet, are you okay?" At the time I had the dream, I was keeping a dream journal, because I had heard that was the first step in training your mind to lucid dream. So I quickly wrote down the situation. I remember worrying about the dream, as I was at the time, operating under the misguided conception that if you die in your dream, you die in real life. I don't think I was in any serious danger in my dream, but the thought occurred to me nonetheless. Fast forward approximately 10 years. I'm living in a new town with my high school buddies. But my parents just moved into a new house up north, finally leaving behind my childhood home, located right off the river and prone to flooding. Because they are no longer at risk of being flooded out, my parents decided to turn the basement into a rec room. They set up a pool table, a TV, and a Wii. But the walls were starting to bother my mom. My dad didn't want to deal with drywalling, but since my parents were about to have a housewarming party, she didn't want the unfinished walls showing. She eventually decided that the backdrops from her time as a photographer would be the best option in hiding them. So I got to work, stapling the backdrops to the rafters so they hung down nicely along the walls. My niece and nephew were very young, 5 and 2 respectively, and they weren't really the best at sharing, each of them trying to gain control of the Wii remote. I used to always play on Dad's ladders when I was young, and I remember sitting on them all the time when he worked. When I got bored, I decided to take a break, sitting down on top of the ladder as I always did. Obviously, over a decade of growing, as well as being a sedentary shit, made my ass, well, much rounder than it used to be, and I find myself falling backwards. As I am falling, I remembered my dream, and ended up screaming, "I dreamed this would happen," before frantically clutching at the backdrops, tearing all the staples out of the rafters. Despite my best efforts, I still ended up bouncing my head off the stud, although the real damage was done when I grabbed at the wall with my hand, catching my pinky on a nail. I'm more concerned with my head, rubbing it frantically, as if that would make it hurt less. All the while, I don't realize I'm smearing blood on my head, cursing all the while and repeating, "I dreamed it." So, as my mom freaks out, checking me over for injuries, probably expecting to find head trauma, considering how crazy I was acting, I hear my niece, "Uncle Garnet, are you okay?" 2. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for this, but it's really strange and I'm forced to chalk it up to being a glitch, because I have no other explanation. When I was 5 years old, my family drove across Canada from Alberta, where we live, to Newfoundland for my aunt and uncle's wedding. I have very few memories of this trip, and the most vivid ones I have apparently didn't happen. I remember this all very clearly, down to the specifics of what certain people were wearing. But no one else in my family can remember any of it. We drove through Ontario. Another aunt and uncle lived in Toronto at the time, and I have a vague memory of visiting them. But at some point while we were in Ontario, we stopped to visit friends of my parents. My dad was in the military, so they had friends all over the country. I remember that the house the people we visited lived in was really cool to me as a kid, because it was a tall, narrow house that was way bigger on the inside, kind of like the houses in Lincoln Park in Chicago. and I've never seen a house like that before. I remember playing outside and riding a tricycle around, and then I had a bath, and then they had a fire. The people had a little kid who was 2 or 3, and I remember she had oxygen. And I found that fascinating because I had asthma, and had to wear the cannulas sometimes too. So I was interested to meet another kid like me. I remember her dad sticking the cannula up my nose too, for some reason. Just kind of playing around, I guess. They put me to bed that night, and then stayed out to sit in front of the fire. I remember I was upset because the little girl didn't have to go inside to bed, but I decided I was going to go out and find them again. I remember going down the hallway and seeing the blinking light of the alarm system, and the house was totally dark. I couldn't hear anyone outside, and I had this strong feeling that nobody else was there anymore. I stood at the top of the stairs for a long time, and then went back, laid down, went to sleep, and when I woke up in the morning, everything was totally normal. We got back into the van and we drove away. The only thing that ever stood out as weird to me in this memory is that I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me, who obviously traveled across Canada with us. We were really close as children, to the point where everybody thought we were twins, and all of my childhood memories involve him in some capacity. But I cannot remember my brother being there at all. I remember my parents being there. I remember other adults who were there. I remember that little girl with the oxygen. But I can't remember my brother. This seems really weird to me, especially because it's super vivid in my memory. I can still recall the layout of the house. It wasn't until I brought it up as an adult, when we were talking about driving across Canada with my parents, that I found out that nobody else recalls that, and they claim that the only stop we made in Ontario, other than to camp overnight in a campground, because we needed to stop for the night, was to visit the aunt and uncle who lived in Toronto at the time. They have no memory of these people or the little girl, and I can still recall all of these details, including conversations I had with people. But I can't remember my brother being there. And I still remember the distinct feeling that no one else was around anymore when I went downstairs to find my parents. My mom says that this never happened, but I am convinced it did. My only explanation that I can think of is that I ended up somehow in a different reality on a different trip for that brief period of time before returning to my regular timeline. For some reason I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I needed to share it with someone because I can't shake how odd, bad it makes me feel. 3. So I've never discussed this with anyone other than my sister and a friend of mine. Around the age of 11, my family decided to go visit my grandparents, and while we were there I decided to go out and play around for a bit. They lived in a flat in the middle of the city. They had a road that had stores and then a car park on the right that had enough space for me to play around with my friends that lived there. As I got down and ran to that car park, a car went past and nearly crashed into me, and in that car there were 3 passengers, a woman, her daughter, and a male driver. As I dodged that car, they looked like they had no emotions whatsoever, and looked really dull, and as I focused into the car, the male driver was my dad. Very easily distinctive. And the car was our car. Same color, same plates, and same everything. As I was in there with shock, I instantly ran up to our car thinking it was stolen, but our car was right there. I turned around to follow the other car, and all I know, the car was no longer there. Standing there in shock, I ran upstairs to my grandparents' house, without knowing what to do or what to say. Luckily, my sister was right by the door, and I told her the story and what I saw. At this moment of time, I didn't mention the part of our car, still. There she is laughing at me, and she told me that my dad hasn't left the house yet. Ever since, I tried to explain to myself what I saw, but I was unable to express what my eyes saw, and finding out about this subreddit today, hopefully you guys can help me out. Quick notes about the passengers and my family. At the time of what happened, I was the youngest child of 2. My sister was 5 years older than me. When my sister was born, she was told that she wasn't going to live past a week, and that my mum would never be able to have kids again. The passenger was a woman that looked slightly like my mum, but I was more shocked about the fact of me seeing my dad with another woman in the car. P.S. We're now a family of 6. 4. One day when I was around 20, I lied down for an astral projection, AP attempt, while my roommates were gone. Up until this point, and still mostly today, I believe your mind will create the world you see in AP after you leave your body. That is, none of it's real. So why do it? The experience itself is real. The feeling of flying and being out of your body is still real. Going down the rabbit hole far enough. It's the Matrix question, what is real? Continuing. After a deep AP session, I slowly come back to my body. Watch my astral body match up with my own, open my eyes, and get up feeling refreshed. There was a nice summerish glow to the room that wasn't there before I started, or in my astral construction, while making my journey home. I get up, go downstairs, turn on the coffee maker, which takes about 5 minutes to make a pot, head back upstairs, turn on the shower, and step in. Being a practicer of lucid dreaming, I put my hand up against the shower wall to test if I'm dreaming, with 100% certainty that I'm not. I fall right through the wall, see the insides of the home, and start falling into the earth as a gigantic hole opens up. Finally, I fall through the ceiling of my bedroom and land hard back into my body. The same way I was laying when I just woke up from my AP session. My first thought was, wow, I never expected a lucid dream check to work so well. I must have fallen asleep during my AP session. As I get up, again, there's that same summerish glow to the room that wasn't there. I walk out of my bedroom and notice that the shower's on. So I go turn it off. And as I'm walking downstairs, the timer starts beeping, indicating that the coffee maker has completed. I walk over and there is a full pot of coffee that just finished up. I start yelling out for my roommates, ran to their rooms, and found the house still empty. To recap: 1. Astral projection session alone at home. 2. Wake up. 3. Walk downstairs and make coffee. 4. Start a shower. 5. Lucid dream check to find out if I'm dreaming. 6. Wake up again. 7. Showers still on and coffee finishes. 8. Still alone. If that same experience had happened several years before, and I had my Neil deGrasse Tyson everything can be explained attitude, I would have attributed this to drugs, the wind, a well-planned prank, hallucination, temporary insanity, being mistaken, or any other worldly explanation. With my new worldview, I'm 26 now, I'm willing to admit I have no idea what I experienced. But something happened. If you're skeptical and thinking, well, why doesn't this happen to me? How often do you go looking for things like this to happen? How often do you put your hand up against a wall and push hard to see if you're awake? You can't see what you're not looking for. 5. This isn't so much a story as it is just kind of weird experiences. When I was in college, I lived and worked in a moderately sized suburban city in Colorado with family. I spent the first 19 years of my life in Texas, so other than my family, I had no friends in this Colorado city. I worked at Michael's and then Blockbuster. Over a few years of interacting with so many locals, I'm convinced I have a doppelganger that happens to be from this town. During my time at Michael's, there were a few instances of customers, usually a couple years younger than me, I was in my early 20s, that were sure they knew me or had seen me before. The first few times it happened, I would laugh and say, "No, I'm not from here," or something to that effect. It happened a lot, but I didn't think too much of it. Once I was shopping and the guy who checked me out, who was a bit younger than me, was sure I went to high school with him. He almost didn't believe me when I told him I was from Texas and graduated in '07. We laughed, and again, I didn't think too much of it. Some girl in this city looks kinda like me. Whatever. The weirdest thing happened at Blockbuster. It was a Friday or Saturday, and despite this being around the time Blockbusters were dropping like flies, we were slammed, like every other weekend. I was at my register getting people through the massive line as fast as possible, when a middle-aged man and his teenage, maybe 14-ish, son walk up. As they set their movies on the counter, they're both looking at me in complete disbelief. I was immediately thrown off and awkwardly asked, "Did you find everything okay?" They finally turned to each other and were like, "Oh my god, she is identical to Cassandra." I laughed and told them, "Oh yeah, I get that a lot." I was still weirded, and think they could tell I was uncomfortable by their reactions. The dad handed me his card so I could get them checked out, but they continued to stare at me in disbelief. The kid was like, "You look exactly like her. That's so crazy." Or something, and then the dad said to me, "Cassandra is my daughter. We just moved her out for her freshman year of college last week. I cannot believe how much you look like her. I thought you were her at first." I could only laugh and respond with, "Well, that's crazy." They continued to gape at me and each other until they were out the door, repeating to me and each other how absolutely insane the resemblance between me and their fucking child sister was. I didn't know what to say other than laugh. I felt like a zoo animal or some shit. I felt bad for being so weird about the whole thing. I was afraid I came off rude, and they were genuinely very, very nice, but it was just so strange. Every time they came into Blockbuster, I checked them out, and they would call me by Cassandra's name. They weren't quite as weird about it after that first time, but still. I look enough like some girl in this city that her dad and brother mistook me for her. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to my latest Glitch in the Matrix video. Thank you very much to all the kind people who allowed me to use their stories, especially those of you who were good enough to help me out last minute and make sure I had enough stories for the video. Very much appreciated. I thought I was going to have to go on a quest and fight a dragon or something to get enough stories this week, but no, emails work, so that was good. It doesn't mean I won't still have to fight a dragon at some point, maybe next week, but I'm not looking forward to it. That dragon's a hair puller. Okay, let's see, where are we at now? This is Thursday, so tomorrow will be paranormal videos. Paranormal, yeah. I always have trouble saying that word, I don't know why. Paranormal. There we go. Right. And Friday might be TIFU. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. I've got about 3 right now. Should be able to get another 2. But I'm not sure if I want to do that or if I want to try something new on Saturday. I don't want to get into too rigid a schedule. I like to have my Sunday, Monday and Wednesday and Friday as set days so you know what you're expecting on those days. But the rest of the days are kind of potluck, so I like that idea. That means I've got opportunities to try new things out, so I'm thinking of some new things. I'll see what I come up with. Okay, I think that's about us for now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.